weren't supposed to remember this. There's a feeling you've carried your whole life. It surfaces in quiet moments when the noise stops and you're left alone with yourself. It's not sadness exactly, not anxiety. It's something deeper. A sense that you're living inside a story you didn't write, playing a character you never chose. Most people dismiss it. They call it existential dread, quarter-life crisis, or just being human. But what if that feeling isn't a flaw in you? What if it's the only true thing left? The world around you runs on agreement. You agree to see yourself a certain way. You agree that your name means something. You agree that your past defines you, that your future depends on choices, that who you are is the sum of what you've done and what's been done to you. But underneath that agreement, there's a silence. It doesn't argue. It doesn't try to convince you. It just watches. And when you feel it, even for a second, everything you've built your identity around suddenly feels hollow, like a costume you forgot you were wearing. The ancient Gnostics called this world a prison made of forgetfulness. Modern psychology calls it identification. The Buddhists call it Maya. Different words, same recognition. You are not living as yourself. You are living as the idea of yourself. And that idea is maintained by something. Not by evil forces in hidden rooms, not by governments or corporations or shadow elites, by something far more intimate, something woven into the way you think, the way you perceive, the way you speak about your own existence. There's a structure inside you that turns experience into identity, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. But first, you have to understand what's been keeping it invisible. Every morning you wake up and reach for the same story. My name is this. I work here. I want that. I fear this. I believe that. The story assembles itself so quickly you don't notice it happening. It feels like waking up, but it's not. It's remembering to be someone. This isn't your fault. It's how the mind survives. A human being can't function as pure awareness. You need boundaries. You need a center. You need to know where you end and the world begins. So the mind builds you. It builds a self, and it does this through a process so automatic, so seamless, that you've never questioned it. You are a collection of memories, preferences, wounds, and projections. Every interaction reinforces the pattern. People treat you like the person you were yesterday, so you keep being them. Your environment expects a certain version of you. Your inner voice repeats the same judgments, the same fears, the same desires. This is what the Matrix is. Not a simulation, not a conspiracy, a self-reinforcing loop of identity that feels like reality. The Gnostics saw this clearly. They said the demiurge, the false god of this world, doesn't rule through force. It rules through forgetfulness. You forget what you were before you became someone. You forget that the self is constructed. You forget that none of this is original. Carl Jung said the same thing in different words. He called it the ego, a necessary fiction that gives shape to consciousness, but eventually traps it. The ego defends itself. It has to. If it stops defending, it dissolves. And that's the fear underneath everything. Not death, not failure, not rejection, dissolution. Because if you're not this person, this story, this bundle of reactions and memories, then what are you? The answer to that question is what they don't want you to find. Not they, as in external controllers. They, as in every structure, internal and external, that depends on you staying inside the narrative. But there's a way out, and it's simpler than you think. Here's the mechanism. Every experience you have gets filtered through a question. What does this mean about me? Something happens. Instantly, unconsciously, your mind assigns it a value, good or bad, threatening or safe, proof that you're enough or proof that you're not. The event itself becomes secondary. What matters is how it affects the story of you. This is the matrix at work, not outside, inside. A person criticizes you. Before you even process what they said, your system reacts, defends, justifies, attacks, or collapses. Either way, the self is reinforced. You become more solid, more defined, more trapped in the character. A person praises you. Same thing. You absorb it as proof. You build on it. You need more of it. The hunger grows. Neither response is free. Because both are serving the same master, the need to maintain a continuous sense of I. The spiritual traditions saw this. Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. Buddhism calls it clinging. The Gnostics called it the counterfeit spirit, the false self that pretends to be you but is actually just a collection of reactions. And here's the disturbing part. It runs automatically. You are not choosing to defend yourself. You are not choosing to feel offended, validated, threatened, or superior. It's happening before choice even arrives. The self protects itself faster than you can think, which raises the question, if the self is defending itself before you decide to defend it, then who are you? Most people never ask this. They live their entire lives inside the reaction. They think they're making choices, but they're actually just following patterns laid down years ago, maybe lifetimes ago if you believe in that kind of continuity. But every once in a while, something breaks the loop. A moment of stillness. A shock. A loss so big the old story can't absorb it. And in that gap, you feel it again. The silence underneath. The one that was always there. That's where the 0 point lives. 0 point is not a place. It's not a state you achieve. It's the absence of position. Think of your life as a constant negotiation. You're always positioning yourself. Smarter than, kinder than, worse than, better than, victim or hero, successful or struggling, spiritual or lost. Every position requires its opposite. Every identity requires resistance. You can't be good unless someone else is bad. You can't be awake unless someone else is asleep. You can't be free unless someone else is trapped. This is the trap. The more you try to become something, the more you solidify the very structure that keeps you bound. Spiritual seeking becomes another identity. Awakening becomes another goal. Freedom becomes another thing to achieve, which means you're still operating inside the system. 0 point is what happens when you stop positioning yourself entirely. Not through effort, not through discipline, not through transcendence or detachment or any other technique that requires a you to perform it. You stop because you finally see that the you who wants to be free is the same you who feels trapped. Same mechanism, same illusion. The Gnostics understood this as the recognition of the self beyond the self. Not the ego, not the personality, not even the soul as it's commonly understood. The original spark, the awareness that existed before it was taught to identify as anything. In psychology, this is the witness, the part of you that observes but doesn't become. It's always been there, watching, untouched by the drama, untouched by your victories and failures, untouched by your entire biography. Most people spend their lives trying to improve the character, make it stronger, wiser, more enlightened. But the character is the prison, and you can't improve your way out of prison. You can only stop agreeing to be the prisoner. But this requires something most people aren't willing to do. You have to let the self feel itself dissolving. Dissolution terrifies the ego because the ego is a survival program. Its job is to keep you coherent, recognizable, continuous. It does this by linking past to present to future. I was this, I am this, I will be this. Remove that thread and the whole structure collapses. This is why people avoid deep introspection. This is why meditation feels threatening at first. This is why spiritual breakthroughs are often preceded by breakdowns. The self doesn't want to be seen, because being seen means being revealed as constructed, and once you see the construction, you can't fully believe in it anymore. Here's what happens at 0 point. You're in a moment, any moment. Someone says something, something happens, and instead of reacting from identity, instead of asking what this means about you, you just stop. Not through willpower, not through control. You stop because you notice the mechanism starting to run, and in that noticing, there's a gap, a pause. In that pause, you are no longer the person who needs to react. You're not the person who needs to be defended. You're not even the person who's trying not to react. You're just awareness, watching identity try to reassemble itself. And in that watching, something remarkable happens. The matrix can't see you, not because you've hidden, not because you've transcended, but because there's nothing there to track. The signal that the system depends on, your identification with thought, emotion, and story, goes quiet. You become invisible to the patterns that have been running you. Jung called this the integration of the shadow, not by fighting it, not by purifying yourself, but by standing in the place where opposites dissolve, where you're neither good nor bad, neither victim nor villain, neither enlightened nor ignorant. You're just here, aware, undeclared. And from that place, the world looks completely different. Not because the world changed, because the lens you've been looking through your entire life just went transparent. But staying there requires something most people resist with everything they have. You have to stop being interesting to yourself. This is the part no one talks about. Spiritual practices often make you more fascinated with yourself, more aware of your progress, your blocks, your insights. You become a project, and projects need managers. So the ego steps in, wearing spiritual robes this time, and keeps running the show. True invisibility to the matrix means you stop finding your own story compelling. You stop needing to explain yourself. Stop needing to be understood. Stop needing to win the argument, even the one happening silently in your head. Stop needing to be the hero of your own narrative. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you stop feeding the machine that turns everything into identity fuel. You meet someone. Normally, within seconds, your system would categorize them: threat or ally, superior or inferior, attractive or irrelevant, judge or witness. Every interaction filtered through. What does this mean about me? But at 0 point, that filter goes offline. Not because you're suppressing it, not because you're trying to be spiritual or detached, but because you've seen through it. And once you see through a magic trick, it stops working. The person in front of you becomes just a person. Not a mirror, not a threat, not a confirmation or a rejection. Just another expression of the same awareness looking out through different eyes. The Gnostics called this the recognition of the divine spark in everyone, not as a belief, as a direct seeing. You realize that everyone is playing the same game. Everyone is trapped in their own story, defending their own position, trying to prove their own worth. And none of it is real. It's all just the matrix talking to itself, creating drama to sustain the illusion of separation. This recognition doesn't make you superior. It makes you compassionate. Because you see that the person attacking you isn't really attacking you. They're defending their story. And their story is just as fragile as yours was. But here's where it gets dangerous. Not physically dangerous, existentially dangerous. Because once you stop feeding the matrix, it starts trying to pull you back in. The pullback is subtle. It doesn't come as external force. It comes as doubt. You'll start questioning whether this is real, whether you're just dissociating, whether you're becoming cold, detached, inhuman. The mind will present you with fears. If you let go of your story, you'll lose your edge. You'll become boring. You'll stop caring about anything. This is the matrix reasserting itself, because the matrix isn't a thing, it's a process. And that process runs through your own thoughts. Every tradition that's touched this truth has warned about this stage. The dark night of the soul, the dweller on the threshold, the point where the old self is dying but the new hasn't stabilized yet. You're standing in the gap, and the gap is terrifying, because it's empty. Not empty like depression, not empty like numbness, empty like space, like potential, like the moment before something is born. But the ego interprets emptiness as death, and it will do anything to avoid it. It will create new stories, new identities, new projects. It will even create a story about being someone who's beyond stories. This is the final trick. The spiritual ego, the one that thinks it's awakened, the one that positions itself as more aware, more conscious, more free than others. And the moment you take that position, you're back in the game. 0 point can't be claimed, can't be owned, can't be used to prove anything. The moment you say, I am at 0 point, you've left it. Because there's no I at 0 point. There's just awareness, experiencing itself without the need to be anyone. This is why the ancient texts are so paradoxical. Why they say things like, those who know don't speak, those who speak don't know. Why they point to silence, to emptiness, to the void. Not because there's nothing there, but because anything you say about it turns it into another concept. another position, another identity. So how do you stay there? You don't. You can't stay anywhere. Staying requires someone to maintain a position. Instead, you return, again and again. Every time you notice you've drifted back into story, back into position, back into defending or explaining or becoming, you return to the 0 point. And each return gets easier, not because you're mastering it, but because you're remembering. Remembering what you actually are underneath all the noise. But there's a cost to this remembering, and most people aren't willing to pay it. The cost is everyone you've ever been. Not metaphorically. Actually, every version of yourself that you've carefully constructed over the years, the successful one, the wounded one, the spiritual one, the rational one, has to be seen as temporary, as costume, as strategy. And strategies die when they're no longer needed. This is where people turn back. Because letting go of identity feels like death. And in a way, it is. The person you've been is dying. Not your body, not your awareness, but the character. The one people know, the one you've defended, the one you've spent your entire life trying to perfect or fix or transcend. That one has to go, and the mind will fight this with everything it has. It will create emergencies. It will manufacture problems that require the old you to solve them. It will pull you into dramas that demand you take a position, choose a side, defend yourself. This is the matrix at its most sophisticated. It doesn't attack you directly. It creates situations where not identifying feels irresponsible, where staying at 0 point feels like cowardice or spiritual bypassing. Someone wrongs you. The matrix whispers, if you don't react, you're letting them win. You're being weak. Someone needs you. The matrix whispers, if you don't step in with your old patterns of caretaking or fixing or proving your worth, you're being selfish. But these are traps, not because defending yourself or helping others is wrong, but because the motivation is coming from identity, from the need to be someone, from the fear that if you don't play the role, you'll disappear. The Gnostics knew this as the archons. Not literal demons, but thought forms. Patterns of consciousness that feed on your identification. They need you to stay in role. They need you to keep defending the self. Because the moment you stop, they lose their power. Jung saw this in the collective unconscious. The archetypes that possess us. The hero, the victim, the sage, the rebel. We think we're choosing them, but they're running through us, using our life force to perpetuate themselves. At 0 point, you see them operating, and in seeing them, you stop being operated. But then the final question arrives, the one you've been avoiding. If you're not any of these versions of yourself, then what remains? What remains is the question itself, not the answer. The question. Because the moment you answer it, you create another identity, another position, another story. The Matrix wants you to answer. It wants you to land somewhere, enlightened or unenlightened, awake or asleep, free or bound. But 0 point is the refusal to land. It's the willingness to live inside the question without collapsing it into certainty. This is unbearable for the thinking mind. The mind wants resolution. It wants to know. It wants to categorize and file and move on. But the deepest truths can't be filed. They can only be lived. And living them means accepting a kind of groundlessness that most people will do anything to avoid. You wake up in the morning and the old pull is there. The pull to become someone, to check your worth, to verify your existence through achievement or connection or some form of external validation. But now you recognize it, and in that recognition, you have a choice you've never had before. Not the choice to be someone better, the choice to not be anyone at all, just for a moment, just long enough to remember that before you were a name, a story, a collection of wounds and victories, you were awareness itself, unconditioned, unbound, unafraid, and you still are. Everything else is performance, necessary sometimes, beautiful even, but not true. The Gnostics called this the moment of Gnosis, direct knowing, not through belief or study or revelation from outside, but through the immediate recognition of what you've always been. Jung called it individuation. not becoming a better individual, but seeing through the individual entirely and touching the self that was never born and can never die. Modern psychology is only beginning to catch up, talking about metacognition, the observer effect, the space between stimulus and response. But they're all pointing to the same thing. There's a place in you that the matrix can't touch, not because it's hidden, because it's prior to everything the matrix uses to track you. It's prior to thought, prior to emotion, prior to identity. And once you find it, you realize something that changes everything. You were never lost. You only thought you were. But thinking you were lost is what kept you searching inside the maze instead of stepping out of it entirely. Now there's only one thing left. You don't escape the matrix. You see through it. And in seeing through it, you continue living, working, loving, struggling, but from a different place. Not from the need to become, not from the fear of dissolving, not from the hunger to be recognized or the terror of being forgotten. From nowhere, from the 0 point, and from there, the strangest thing happens. Life becomes more vivid, not less. Colors sharpen, moments breathe, conversations become direct, art becomes honest, silence becomes full, not because you've gained something, but because you've stopped filtering everything through the question of what it means about you. The world stops being a mirror and becomes itself again. And you stop being a story and become presence. Not permanent presence. Not perfect presence. Just presence. Here. Now. Aware. Until you forget again. And you will forget. The matrix is persuasive. Identity is seductive. The pull to become someone, to matter, to be seen, never fully disappears. But now you know the way back. You've tasted the 0 point. And once you've tasted it, you can't fully believe the old stories anymore. They still play, they still pull, but there's a part of you now that's standing outside the theater, watching the performance and smiling. Not because you've transcended, but because you've finally remembered what you've always been, and what you've always been was never inside the matrix to begin with. It was only ever watching, quiet, invisible, free.